What's going on, guys? This is Rob, and we are back with Absolute Green Lantern. I just finished recording the Incredible Hulk video like 3 minutes ago, so I can't be as excited or I'm gonna lose my voice. Having said that, what this does is this picks up with the voice of Oa communicating with Hector Hammond. Now, there are a few things that we have to keep in mind here when it comes to the Absolute Green Lantern mythos, right? When it comes to Oa, we don't necessarily know the ins and outs of this. We do know now that whenever someone comes into contact with what is in effect any part of the Lantern mythos, right, and we're going to talk about that a little bit more here in a minute, they do end up seeing this voice of Oa. It appears as a black ring. Initially, we didn't know what it was. We didn't know what it represented. We assumed it was kind of like the representation of darkness, essentially, right? Evil, or whatever it was that was controlling the Dark Stars. So basically, evil lanterns, if you want to call it that. But now things are getting a little more interesting and a lot more explanation is coming from Al Ewing. And that's why the voice says, "Can you hear me? I am the voice of Oa, Hector Hammond, voice of the Green Lantern. I am the secret heart within every star. You must hear me, Hector Hammond. Hear me and have understanding." But instead of embracing it, Hector just says, whoever's talking, shut the hell up. I am busy. Right? And of course, because he's not actually talking to anyone present, his assistants don't really know what he's referring to, right? They think he might just be a little bit crazy. But regardless, Hector Hammond is controlling Obsidian in all of this. Now, let's provide a little explanation here, because it's been a while since we covered Absolute Green Lantern, and specifically what was going on with Obsidian. So Obsidian is basically Todd Rice. Todd Rice was a guy who ran the bar in the city of Evergreen, right? That's where Joe Mullein and John Stewart, Guy Gardner, Hal Jordan were all located at. What ended up happening is that when the Green Lantern first showed up, and basically all hell broke loose in the first like 3 or 4 issues of the story, that it led to Todd Rice surviving, despite the fact that it was believed he was dead. And then once he was taken by Hector Hammond, explaining everything. Following that, what Hector Hammond had done is he had taken a little bit of the Black Hand. So basically, this stuff, right, that Hal Jordan was bonded to when he was the Black Hand itself, he took that and then bonded it to Todd Rice, and it turned itself into this extremely durable and bulletproof carapace that you see here. But because there was no brain activity, it basically just allowed Hector Hammond to use a device called the Mento device, which allows him to control minds, to control Todd Rice himself, and through Todd Rice, control the Obsidian form. So that's what's kind of bonkers here, right? Things are a little wild in terms of what's going on. And so when you have Hal Jordan, Cameron Chase, and Joe Mullein fleeing for their lives, right? Cameron Chase just says, start running. Right, just run as fast as you possibly can. And then you get a little bit of a flashback here. And it actually kind of shows the complex nature between Hal Jordan and Joe Mullein. Now understand, there isn't really much in the way of a romantic connection here, right? Joe Mullein is gay, right? She was married to Cameron Chase. So it's not as though there was a romance between these two, but they were very, very close friends. And at a time when Joe Mullein needed Hal Jordan the most, he wasn't there. Not only that, we learn more about the character of Hal Jordan himself, that in the early stories of the Absolute Green Lantern line, we thought that Hal Jordan was just a guy who seemed a little mysterious. We didn't know a whole lot about his past. He didn't feel like the main DC Universe Hal Jordan, who will basically kind of go flying into battle, oftentimes recklessly, but brave nonetheless. But we didn't quite know where he fit in relation to that. What we end up finding out here is that Hal Jordan just doesn't really have it together, and never really has. He's been nothing like the Hal Jordan that we know from the main DC line, because what ends up happening is that as they're talking, Joe Mullein says, "I will be right behind you," and Hal Jordan asks what she's talking about, and she says, "What you said when I left, I swear I will be right behind you, but you're still in Evergreen." And Hal just tells her, well, I mean, like, Mom moved to Florida, that was her big dream, to get out of the desert. Jack was already in Colorado, so it was just me and Jim in that house. Jim meets this girl online, yada yada yada, suddenly he's moving to Athens. I swear, that was all in 1 year, so I'm the only one left. And so Joe asks him, so you stayed because everybody else went away? They followed their dreams and you just didn't really have any? And Hal's just like, what are you talking about, right? I've got dreams, Joe, right? I've got the house, I'm working for myself and doing what I want. That's everyone's dream, isn't it? Like, what else would I want? And he says, well, technically Jack owns the house, but I'll pay him back any day now, right? I got a good feeling about some Blue Devils Funzos that I picked up, right? He's talking about Funkos, if you guys remember that Funko craze from back in the day. And Joe doesn't know what he's talking about. She's like, what are you referring to? And Hal just says, right, I'm sorry that I never followed you out there, right? I should have come come not just for your wedding. And she says, yeah, right, that would have been nice, Hal. If you came out sooner, you could have probably talked me out of some really bad decisions. Because at that point, she's talking about her marriage to Cameron Chase, right? It was a very, very poor decision, but it was a decision that she made nonetheless. And Hal actually calls it. He was like, so you're talking about the wedding ring, right? Like, I could probably get a good price for you on that. And then she just like yanks her hand away and it's like, absolutely not. And she says, the ring is not for sale. I am not taking it off. I am never taking it off. Now, that's important. I want you to keep that in the back of your head. It'll become more important as time goes on. But that ring in the here and now, as far as the absolute Green Lantern mythos goes, that's the source of her power, or at least what the Green Lantern energy bonded to. That's one of the big differences between the main DC Universe Green Lantern mythos and this one, that when the Green Lantern mythos bonds to you, it bonds to seemingly an artifact that is important to you. It might be some kind of a necklace or amulet around your neck. In the case of Jo Mullein, it's a ring. It's not like the main DC universe where a ring appears to you and says, you have the ability to overcome great fear, welcome to the Green Lantern Corps, and then whisks you away to Oa, where Kilowog's just gonna scream at you until you start doing stuff right. That's not really how that works. It's one of the coolest things about this, though, because Hal, in recognizing that he could pawn the ring for her was in bad taste, says that, right? That was clearly in bad taste. I probably shouldn't have said that. And Jo just says it's fine, right? Coast City was not good for me is the only thing that really matters here. And there's a really long story behind it. And so Hal Jordan just says, I really am sorry, Jo, right? We are friends, and I was not there when you needed me. And he just says, I will make it up to you next time. Okay, and she's like, sure, Hal, next time. Because what this seems to indicate is that Hal Jordan's one of these guys where it's always a next time. It's always, hey, I'll hit you up the next time around. Oh, I'll pay you back the next time that I get paid. It's always next time, next time, next time. So he's not quite the guy that keeps his word. He's not quite the guy that's in your corner when you need him. There's always some reason why he can't do that. That very much seems to be the character that he is. And so when you jump back to the here and now, when they're being chased by Obsidian, Cameron Chase is just like, Jordan, get out of here. And Jordan just says, no, right? Like, I can't just leave you. And she's like, you're blocking the exit, you moron. Back up. Get out of the way of the door. Because Cameron Chase is not the woman to just be like, yeah, I'm going to sacrifice myself. If she's going to sacrifice herself for anybody, it's going to be for Jo Mullein, her ex-wife. It's not going to be for Hal Jordan. That's never going to happen, right? And so what ends up happening is they just bolt as fast as they can, right? Hal even says, through the door, right, up the stairs, get there as fast as you can. And Jo Mullein just says, I will keep him busy, and starts firing at Obsidian. And in that moment, Hector Hammond freaks out and yanks off the helmet, right? And that's when you start to realize that what he sees are things that he's just not prepared for. In this particular instance, being fired at by a gun. Because the way he sees things is the way you and I see things, which is effectively Cameron Chase standing in front of him with a handgun, unloading. We as human beings were not meant to experience that, which is to say, like, bullets bouncing off of us, right? Like somebody points a gun at you and they pull the trigger, you're probably gonna panic more often than not. Either that or everything's just gonna go black. For Hector Hammond, he's experiencing what it's like to be shot at point blank range. And that's what he says, right? They're just like, your vitals are spiking, Mr. Hammond. If you need to, take a break. And Hector's just like, no, right? Like, you would like that, wouldn't you? Me looking weak. You try seeing someone fire a gun right into your face. And that's where he's told by his assistants, right? We don't know how the Mento device responds to extreme stress. And that's where Hector just says, nobody's stressed, right? Nobody. I just got startled is all, right? I just got startled. And so when he puts the helmet back on, the question he has is, where are they? Because in the moment when he took the helmet off, Cameron Chase and them made their escape. And it's one of the cool things, right? Because Hal Jordan asks, right, why did it stop? And Cameron says, I told you, there is a mind directing that thing. Somebody who gets distracted when you fire at them. I figured I could make them flinch. And Jo just asks her, and what if you'd been wrong? Cameron just says, well, then I would be dead, but maybe you wouldn't be. And I guess I still care about that on some level, but I wish you'd given me back the ring. Because again, there's unresolved emotional trauma between the two of them. And Cameron follows that up and asks, I mean, like, don't you wish you'd given me back the ring? Like, you wouldn't be in this situation if you didn't have the ring in the first place. And that's true, right? Because by way of the ring, Jo Mullein unintentionally absorbed Abin Sur's power, right? The power of the Green Lantern. And that's where she says no, right? I would be in a whole different situation. I'd be inside the Green Lantern with John and Guy and their whole weird cult, because that's what happened with John Stewart and Guy Gardner. They were sucked inside of the Green Lantern itself. They were gaining knowledge, right? Now that's how John Stewart basically became the Gold, or most likely the Yellow Lantern, and that's where Guy Gardner became the Red Lantern. Now again, there's a whole ranking system there, but the fact is, right, Hal Jordan, in hearing all of this, just just says, sure, me too, and maybe a few people would still be alive. I know I wish that. Right? But that's where Joe just says, it doesn't matter. And I didn't give it back. I could not take this ring off. And that's where Cameron just says, I took mine off. I sold it. And it felt good. It felt like closure. Now, she's not saying this to like make Joe feel bad. It's just a statement of fact, right? Talking about how she felt. And that's where Joe just says, yeah, I can see that, right? I can see that it gave you the closure that you were looking for. This seems a little sarcastic because Cameron Chase is still struggling with a lot of the things that went on in their relationship. So the whole idea of it being closure doesn't really seem to be true. But that's where Joe just says, that's why I couldn't, right? And she doesn't really finish that sentence. Instead, Hal cuts her off and just says, wait, stop, right? I don't hear him coming up the stairs. Is he even coming after us? And that's where Obsidian just like smashes through the floor, right? Through like the ceiling of this building and just starts attacking everybody again. And at that point, Joe doesn't go anywhere. She just says, I didn't want closure. That's why I didn't get rid of my ring. I did not want closure, right? And that's why he says, like a bomb going off, right? Stay on task, Simon. If you see your own face, you die. It's like they say about plane crashes, secure your own mask first. And he actually ends up using aluminum foil to wrap his face in order to keep from being able to see his own face. But the important thing here is that amidst all the rubble, right, when Jo Mullein had lost her ring, because that's the other part of this, it's one of the reasons why she's taking all this so hard, her ring came off and she couldn't find it. The ring itself powers up and then disappears, right? Just blinks out of existence. And so at that point, you jump to Jo Mullein, right? And she says, the weight of it, heavy as lead. I wanted that with me, part of me. All my sins, all my mistakes, all the pain, what I felt and what I'd caused. I wanted to feel it, Cameron, and I can feel it now, and it hurts, but it's mine, right? It is my pain, and it's my life. The bad, the good, everything I am is in this ring, and no one takes that away. Now, there's truth to this statement, right? We as human beings are, at any point in time, some combination of our experiences and the things that we have been taught. And some would argue and say that the experiences that we have are far more significant than the things that we were taught. For example, Immanuel Kant argued the only real knowledge is knowledge through experience, right? If I tell you that bottle of hot sauce is hot, you won't know how hot it is until you actually drink it, because maybe my tolerance is higher than yours. But these things also define us. They make us into the people that we are. And so to simply just close that part of your life and to walk away from that part of your life is to deny a very important part of yourself. And that's what Jo Mullein is saying here, right? Yes, her marriage to Cameron Chase represents a very big mistake in her life, but it also represents love. It also represents the fact that for a time, she thought she had found someone who was hers. Now, of course, they both had their own set of problems. Neither of them had any business getting married, but for a time. And so these are all important lessons that come together. Why would you deny that? Right? And so that's where when Joe goes chasing after Obsidian, right? Hal Jordan says, Joe, wait, somebody is in there. And that's where Joe says, Cameron said someone's controlling it. Someone who murdered Carrie. Someone who was sent to kill us all, just like Goldface. And they are going to get what Goldface got. There's a lot of rage back here, right? And so she literally just manifests this gigantic fist, and it looks amazing, and just sends Obsidian smashing into the ground. And that's where Hal says, that's not what I meant. Someone is in there. There is an actual being there. But notice this, Hal Jordan's hand starts to light up, right? It literally starts to emit energy. And this is important because Obsidian in turn fires back on Jo Mullein. And Hector Hammond just says, eat it, Mullein. You're gonna beg to tell me what you know. And even his assistants are just saying, sir, please, the ECG readings, right? You are in danger. But that's where Carol Ferris chimes in and says, it's fine, doctor, let the man work. Now, keep in mind, Hector Hammond always taunts Carol Ferris. He basically makes life hell on her, right? He talks down to her, he mistreats her. I wouldn't go so far as to say that there's anything untoward that's being done by Hector Hammond physically, but the fact is, he doesn't respect her in any meaningful way. So you can interpret this a couple different ways, right? Where she's just like, look, I'm looking at the readings, his brain's gonna be fine. Or you could look at it from the perspective of, oh, he's fine, doctor, right? Just let him keep doing what he's doing, in the hopes that he ends up scrambling his own brains by pushing the Mento device too far. We don't necessarily know. But what matters is this. With Jo Mullein, while she's lit up with the Green Lantern, suddenly everything around her starts turning Magenta. Now, those of you guys who are familiar with the Green Lantern mythos, you know where this is going. You know where this is going, and it's dope. Oh my God, it's so incredibly dope, right? Cameron Chase comes running up on Joe, right, and just calls for her. But Joe Mullein just says, I'm okay, right? But whoever's inside this monster, I am taking you down. And that's where Hal Jordan just appears above her and just says, up. We help them up. There's someone in there, trapped. And Joe doesn't really know how to process. She's like, how? And he says, I can feel them. Somebody who was forced into this. Whoever's hunting us wanted a Tomar, but the Black Star itself is Tomar. Anomaly. What did the Abin Sewer want? What is chaotic action, Joe? Now, if you're a little confused by this, that's fair. Joe says the same thing, right? Like, Hal, you're not making any sense. I can't fight both of you. And Hal just says, it's not about fighting. Action without thought. Maybe it's violence. Maybe it's hate and cruelty and blind obedience. It could be those things if you twisted it. Or it could be something else. Something like love. And Hal Jordan touches Obsidian and says, be free. And at that point, it frees him from Hector Hammond. Now, what we're seeing here is a star sapphire, and it's amazing, right? But what this does is it totally changes the concept of the Green Lantern mythos in the absolute universe, right? When we were learning about all these things, right? Tomar and so on and so forth, Rao, the red light of rage, all that kind of stuff, we largely assumed, right, that chaotic action was rage itself. But we also kind of assumed there were only a handful of these things, and they were based something on like the emotional spectrum, right? Rage, fear, love, willpower, death, life, hope, so on and so forth. What this really looks like here is it looks like the entire quote-unquote emotional spectrum is not necessarily rooted in any one particular thing. It's based on feelings. Right? It's based on how you feel. Because the reality here is that rage is a chaotic action, but what does rage come from? Rage does not exist indiscriminately, right? What Hal Jordan says here, right? Maybe it's violence, maybe it's hate and cruelty and blind obedience. What do those things stem from? People blindly follow other people around them because of love. It may be varying degrees of love, but love nonetheless. Love can lead to hate, right? Love can lead to cruelty because these things are secondary emotions. People aren't born angry. People love something and then lose something, right? A woman walks into her home and finds the man in her life cheating on her, right? That love instantly turns to rage, right? That's what we're talking about here. That's what's so cool, is because instead of it being the red light of rage, it's seemingly the magenta light of love. Now again, this is not an absolute. We're learning more about this as time goes on. But the fact that we have a new Lantern Corps now, this is dope, right? This is so cool. So of course, with Hector Hammond's connection cut off, he's incensed, right? And he's like, you magenta dick, right? You are dead. Your whole family is dead. And even the question's asked, right? What happened? And that's where Carol's just like, a massive power surge. It looks like the local grid is down. And in addition, we've lost all contact with the Obsidian creature. According to the final readings that we have, it no longer exists. What a shame, right? So she's almost kind of taunting, right, Hector Hammond in this way. And Hector's just like, oh, it's a shame. Is that all you've got to say, sweetheart? Because I meant what I said. I meant every damn word of it. Get me Florida. Now, this is an important thing, right? Because one of the things that Hector Hammond had told her is that, yes, she's the one who knows where all the bodies are buried, but hers can be buried alongside them too. Secrets only matter if anybody cares what you have to say, or if there's anyone out there that cannot stop your secrets from becoming public, right? But it wouldn't be that hard for Hector Hammond, with all his money and all his resources, to destroy everything about Carol Ferris. But what all this is hinting at is that Carol will likely betray Hector Hammond. Whether that's true or not, I don't know. But then you switch back to Hal, right? And Hal just asked the question, have you ever suffered? Maybe it's all one thing. Maybe we are all one thing. But he doesn't really finish that statement, so we don't know exactly what he was going to reference. But then he sees Todd, and he's just like, Todd Rice, right? And that's where Cameron's like, you know this guy. And Hal just says, yeah, he ran the bar back home. I thought he was dead. We all thought he was dead. And Joe just says, give it time. The green power is being very strange around him. I don't think that he is in good shape. What did you do to him, Hal? And that's where Hal doesn't really get a chance to answer. Instead, Simon Baz shows up, right? And that's where Cameron's like, nice of you to join us, Simon. Finally showing up here in the midst of all of this. In his defense, He was trying to find something to wrap his face with, right? Because, you know, if he sees his face, he dies. And he actually wrapped his face with aluminum foil. And he says that, right? When Cameron's just like, and protected against the CIA's insidious mind race too, a conscientious man, right? Simon's just like, come on, Cam, like shiny aluminum foil. Do you know what a risk I just took for you? And he says, look, I wanted to flank it, so I took the back stairs, the ones that come up behind the building. And he says, so I went outside, and there's something that you have to see out here right now. And so when they get out there, the Green Lantern has returned. Keep in mind, this is what originally appeared over Evergreen at the very beginning of this story. It's almost kind of like it's all repeating itself. And so Cameron asks the question, right? What am I looking at, Joe? And Joe just tells her, right? You know as much as I do. Hell, you know more than I do. That's what landed in Evergreen. That's the Green Lantern. Why is it here? And then this voice comes out of nowhere and says, Lantern is a poor translation, Tomar, Joe. A better word in your language is gun. Anyway, I'm gonna go kill Mogo with it. Are you coming? Because it's Tomar Re. It's the Red Lantern. With that being said, guys, we're gonna bring this video to an end. Al Ewing is nothing if not the slow burn guy, but this story is getting so good. It's getting so incredibly good. Thank you guys for watching. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, drop a like, and I will catch you all later. Peace.